Welcome, one and all, to B Cube Sunday morning. Now, this is kind of a special edition. You'll notice that you see David Gerrold there, and he's not got Jim, and it's just me and him. And we're talking about something that's very near and dear to our hearts, and that is gun violence. I mean, we're dealing in a world that I think has just about got saturated with firearms, and people are dying in mass quantities. It's just, I could spend the whole hour spouting statistics about how bad it is, but instead of how bad it is, Dave's got some real well thought out, well researched, well reasoned thoughts on what maybe we, the individual, can do. And so, Dave, good morning, David, and good morning, and welcome to the show.
Well, good morning to you. Thank you for having me again. And it's always fun to do your show. And it's always, I get good feedback from people. So as long as I'm not boring people, I'm happy. um, there's I used to have a little card over my desk, bore me and die, which was a warning to myself how to write for others is or even interact with others on any level. Now, let me talk about my qualifications. I am not a member of the NRA. I do not endorse their politics. I find them an offensive and evil organization. One time, and by the way, there's evidence that they funneled Russian money into the last election. So I'm not in 2016 as well. So I'm not happy about that either. But at one time, the NRA was a responsible organization dedicated to gun safety. But the NRA is owned by gun manufacturers, and their goal is to sell guns. Now, I have fired guns. I have fired a lot of guns. I have fired shotguns. I have fired an AR-15. I have fired um, an Uzi, the kind that you see in the movies. They have a lot of mechanical recoil. I have also fired an HK, which is a much smoother. That's Heckler-Koch, which is what the Secret Service carries. It's got a much smoother action. And when you fire there's a physical feeling to firing an automatic weapon, like going to the gym. You come away after you have, shot the targets, shouting "Die, commie, die," and had a great time, pretending you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. You come away with that a physical feeling like you have just had a great workout at the gym. You're sore, but it's a good soreness. I have fired a 6 hour Glock, maybe a couple other handguns. I've lost count. So I'm not unfamiliar with guns. If you handed me a handgun, I would be able to remove the magazine. I would be able to check it to make sure it's safe. I would be able to make sure the safety's on. Especially if it was a weapon I had some familiarity with. Otherwise, I would look at it very carefully. I know enough never to point the gun anywhere but at the ground. So I would say that you could consider me responsible. You could consider me responsible about guns. And that's my feeling about gun is not as gun control, it's gun safety and gun responsibility. Now, not specifically the last time I had this specific conversation, but we're online. This goes back to CompuServe and some of the Second Amendment fanatics who believed they needed their guns to overthrow a tyrannical government because obviously that tyrannical government won't have tanks and planes and cruise missiles and so on. One of them came after me and said, "You wouldn't feel that." And I said, I really do feel we need more responsible gun laws in this country, a better relationship with weaponry. And one of them came after me and said, "You wouldn't feel that way if you'd ever lost someone to a gun," which is absolutely the wrong thing to say to me because I've lost 3 people to gun violence. One was a friend from Las Vegas named Ed Baker, who was found dead in the streets of Hollywood one night. shot by either a mugger or a hustler. We're never sure what. Another was a cousin who was shot by a husband who lost his sanity. And the third was someone so close to me, I do not even like to discuss the details at all. So I said to this person, how dare you drag the dead body of a loved one across this thread, offering me a sniff? How dare you use the dead as a justification for your bigotry? That didn't end the conversation, but he went off. He's like, he's not going to be able to deal with someone who knows how to go all Harlan. Remember, I studied under Harlan for many years. I'll never be the master he was, probably because I don't want to be. But I learned the lesson is when you have a moral high ground, a true moral high ground, you do not go on the defense. And your true moral high ground is to remain empathy and compassion. And my empathy and compassion goes for the families. Because what I know from my own personal experience is that if you have gun violence at any point in your life, if you have lost someone to a gun, you never fully get over it. Every so often, you wonder, gee, I wonder where he would be right now. I wonder what she would be doing right now. I wonder what kind of a life they'd be having. I wonder what we're missing. I wonder what's not happening. You never recover from losing someone to a gun. And so this is why I have a difficult time reading the news. I turn on the news while I'm driving only for the traffic updates, but every so often there's, grandfather takes his 7-year-old grandson to a park. Two guys get into a fight and bullets start flying. He rushes the kid to the car. They get into the car and a stray bullet kills the kid. As a grandparent, I think I would find it impossible to go on living like that, knowing that I had taken my kid into danger. And it's one of the reasons I don't want to live in Los Angeles anymore, even though yesterday's news was that gun crime, gun violence, gun deaths are on the decline now that the pandemic is over. Go figure what that was all about. We can't feel safe anymore because we have created for ourselves an unsafe civilization. Now, if you were to live in Europe or Australia, or one of the other civilized nations, Japan, you would not worry about some madman with a gun. You wouldn't worry about somebody invading the concert or the theater or worse, the school. I have a great deal of trouble with the school shootings because I empathize so much with the kids who died and the parents who will never have their kids coming home. So, and my son and I have this conversation a lot. My son is very literate. He does his research. I'm so blessed to have such an amazing son. When we talk about this, his feeling, and I tend to agree with him, is that gun ownership should be restricted to people over the age of 25. And exceptions where guns are needed for hunting. If you need to put food in the larder to get through the winter, if you need to kill a deer, to feed your family through the winter. There are families in some of the remote areas of Wisconsin and Montana and so on that do need to feed their families that way. I don't want to penalize them. But when we're talking big cities, gangs, etc., we need to have incredible enforcement on gangs. And Sean feels, and I agree, is the average male is not mature enough to handle a gun until age 25. We also need stronger mental health background checks. Really find out what the profile is. And if somebody fits the profile, they're going to have to work very hard. We need gun safety classes. You want to It's like here in California, you want to buy a gun, you go to, I don't know, a place called Turner's, and you fill out the paperwork. They run a background check, the federal background check, and you pick out the gun, you pay for it, and if you pass the background check after a suitable waiting period, which I think is 3 days or 10 days, I'm not sure. Anyway, somewhere in there, then you can pick up the gun. Now, the gun safety course at Turner's is they walk you through that you understand the gun, and then you do it as clumsy as you are. And once they're satisfied you have gone through it once or maybe twice, you can go home with that gun. So it's not that hard for a person without a criminal record to get a gun here in California, which is fairly strict gun laws. I don't think our gun laws are strict enough. I think we need gun safety courses. Like when I was a kid, you can get a driver's license unless you had taken driver training ed in high school. You can't get a driver's license until you have proven you can drive a car, and that requires a driver training course. If we made owning a gun at least as difficult as getting a driver's license, perhaps we would be able to weed out some of those who are not qualified. The other thing we need to do is clamp down on gun show sales and kitchen table sales. I want to point out a couple things that 20, 30 years ago, when we had a Democratic administration and they clamped down on kitchen table sales, gun violence dropped because there were several laws in place. One was use a gun, it's a federal crime. A lot of people who didn't want to deal with federal crime stopped carrying guns. Gun violence went down. Another one was the person who sold you the gun is also held accountable. And so when they started tracking where the gun had come from, they found a lot of kitchen table gun dealers, people who operated literally out of their kitchens. And when a lot of those were shut down or quit because they didn't want the scrutiny, gun violence dropped. There were other laws that we had in place that made it harder for guns to find their way into the hands of those who intended violence on others or who would give into violence. And by the way, just so people understand, I have had guns pointed at me 2 or 3 times in my life. Once was by a person who was obviously out of control. I am not happy with the fact that we are awash in a sea of guns. The relationship between guns and crime is pretty bad. Back in the wet days of the Old West, having the right gun the guns were called equalizers. Well, they weren't equalizers. They allowed bullies like the fictional Liberty Valance to terrorize people who just wanted to find a better life for themselves. All right. I'm looking at the threads here. How do we put 400 million genies back in the bottle? I don't have an easy answer. I am not the guru who has all the answers, but I know that every little step we take, it's kind of like you don't solve the problem. I know there are people who want big, simple, sweeping gestures, and that's how Donald Trump got into office. He appealed to that mass of people who wanted a big, simple, I'll solve it all for you. I'm the only guy who can do it right. Tripled our national debt, something like that. It's like, didn't build a wall, didn't solve, where's the health care plan? I'll have it in 2 weeks, right? It'll be bigly. You don't solve a big problem all at once. You solve it a piece at a time. I speak this as a novelist. You don't write the whole book at once. You write a page at a time. You write a paragraph. You write a sentence at a time. You whittle away at those parts of it that you see in front of you until you get down to the core. And that's what we need to work on is the specifics. Excuse me a second. The problem is that the opposition is so well organized, they will fight you on the specifics, on all of the little things. So if you want to have increased gun training, say we don't need increased gun training, even if you can prove that increased gun training makes gun owners more responsible, they will argue against it, even as they will admit that guns are not the problem, people are the problem. But they won't allow us to, because, and let me say it this way. I said this to somebody one time in a CompuServe forum. I said, I didn't want to take your guns away until you started frothing at the mouth, because there is a knee-jerk response that the right wing has created, that any discussion of guns makes you a woke liberal enemy who must be punished and owned. And they have plugged into that emotional mindset so well that the only way we are going to solve this problem is not rationally but emotionally. I'm going to stop there and open this up to insights that I might not have. One of the reasons for discussions like this is it's not just an opportunity for me to give a semi-informed discussion or create the foundation for a semi-informed discussion, but to hear the things that I haven't learned yet. So, yeah.
Well, David, I think that, I mean, you've made a pretty good point. Have you, I was reading a little bit about red flag laws. And while they will prevent some gun violence, and you talk about the gun lobby or the gun enthusiasts with their canned responses, will always go to the gaslighting technique of, well, show me when, tell me when I treated you badly, or tell me when I did this specific thing, and so tell me when a single red flag law would have saved somebody's life. When you look at the larger picture of it, and you see you go down to I can't remember what county it is that they have refused to enforce red flag laws. The family can go in there and say, "Hey, I think Johnny needs his guns taken away," and basically, so what? So, do
And
you
then
think?
if Johnny goes and shoots up a school, I think that the failure of law enforcement in that area would be grounds for a major lawsuit. That's how you create corrections. Is you have to have lawyers who are willing to make it hurt.
Now, that's where you had one point there that I very much liked, and that is some degree of liability for the gun seller. Did you have anything you wanted to expand on?
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. One of the things that I think would be a major. In fact, there's 2 points. One is about the Second Amendment, but one of the things is if we required gun insurance the same way we require driver's insurance, car insurance. If we required insurance on the gun against theft and against hurting someone else, if we required gun insurance for gun owners, and it doesn't have to be a lot of insurance, even if it was only maybe $100 a year for each gun. And maybe a special thing for collectors, because I know there are a lot of honest, good collectors. Unfortunately, one of the collectors I knew later used one of his guns to commit suicide. So he was a veteran. He was a great deal in physical pain, and the VA couldn't help him anymore. But I believe that we need to have insurance laws and let the insurance companies act on let the insurance companies, if they say, oh no, we don't want to insure you because you're a bad driver, then here in California you're an assigned risk and you pay a lot for insurance, but you have to have insurance or your guns are impounded. If you don't have car insurance, your driver's license is suspended. In fact, I got one of those threats. We're going to suspend your license. We changed insurance companies. And I had to get on Progressive and say, hey, I want Flo to get on the phone and tell them we are insured. Oh, okay, yeah. If we had the same thing for guns, there would be a lot of people who either wouldn't be able to afford to own a gun or who would be under much more careful scrutiny. People in neighborhoods with a much higher crime rate would have to pay a higher rate, perhaps. That's one. The second thing is the Second Amendment is, as it is currently taught today by the NRA and other right wingers, is a fraud perpetrated on the American public. The purpose of the Second Amendment was to give slave owners the right to put down slave rebellions. Do your history. It wasn't about it was about the right of the states to raise a militia to put down a slave rebellion. And it was the Second Amendment. It was put in because the states demanded certain protections against a federal government. At that time, the states were much more independent than they are now. That the Second Amendment has now been misinterpreted, that you have to have a gun to defend yourself against a tyrannical government, is like, we saw how that worked out at Waco. It doesn't work. And these guys who are claiming they're patriots, the so-called Second Amendment patriots, are talking about revolution. Is that what you think January 6th insurrection was about? It was not about patriots defending the Constitution. It was about so-called, I don't know what to call them, domestic terrorists trying to overthrow the Constitution. Anyway, yeah. Look, we should have started to have conversations about gun control after John F. Kennedy was shot down in the streets of Dallas. We should have had conversations about gun control after Charles Whitman climbed to, I think it's Charles Tex Whitman, climbed to the top of the tower at the University of Texas and killed 36 people. We should have had this conversation after the Manson murders in August of 1969. We should have had these conversations as an ongoing thing. How do we make our streets safer? I'll stop there. I want to see what other people have to say. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, there are, I think as in 2005, we were selling about 5 million guns a year to the public. And now we're selling something like 16 or 17, maybe, I think we broke 20 million one year. And I don't have numbers for what the actual gun ownership is, but it's over the top horrendous. And
well, I'll tell you one thing is a lot of liberals are buying guns too.
If you look at the statistics right now on people who self-identify as gun owners, 12% of all liberals own guns. That's just, I own guns, and I'm fairly liberal. I'm not going to say how many I own, but you had your qualifications as you were you listed them. Mine are, I happen to be from Texas. My most interesting gun story is this: when I married my wife, her father took me down into the basement and showed me his gun safe, thinking his gun cabinet, thinking he was going to intimidate me and make me understand what a trouble I'd be in. What I heard from him was, "I really like you, and I wanted to share with you my guns." And so there's culture aspects of it. So one of the works in progress right now we're dealing with, we did a little bit of research, and liberals are one of the fastest growing population owners of guns. They are growing. Women are getting more guns. Now, question for you, David. We hear about the AR-15, the assault rifle, the mass shootings. But when you really get down to the gross reality of it, it's handguns that are killing people in the mass quantities every day. Do you see any value in the handgun regulation versus the assault rifle regulation?
Well, I am of two minds of it. It's like I don't look if the AR-15, the AR-15 as a sport rifle, if you go to the range and practice target shooting, um, it's a very interesting weapon. Um, it's not my favorite. I have no interest in, if I never went to the range and never had another opportunity to fire an AR-15, I would not miss it. Um, but I can understand the appeal to have a weapon like that. And here is there is look, we as human beings, we love our toys. And if you look at every technology we've invented, parachutes, we have people who go skydiving, even though the parachute was not invented as a sport. We have jet skis, even though motorboats and whatever weren't invented as a sport. People turn things into sports. Water skiing, skiing, all of these things, all of it. It's like we invented the all of our computer toys and for business, and we look at the games we play on them are more exciting than the business uses. The game, the motion picture camera has become, we have found other uses for it than the original intended one. Everything gets turned into a toy of some kind, even a sex toy. So the fact that the weapons that were invented for war have become amusements, people go and we have places here in LA where there are competitions of all kinds, skeet shooting and whatever, and more power to these guys. They're having a great time doing something that they're not hurting anybody. So it's like I'm not against the sport uses, because what that does is it creates expertise in an area that we need expertise. I'll give you an example. During World War II, the if a German Jeep broke down, the German truck broke down, they had to wait until a specialist could be called on scene to fix the truck. If an American Jeep or truck broke down, the GIs climbed out, opened up the hood, and fixed it. Why? Because during the 30s, American boys were getting their hands on jalopies and tinkering with cars, and just about so many of our young men who went off to World War II already knew how to fix a Jeep or a truck or change a tire or whatever, because they had had hands-on experience. So I don't object to people having hands-on experience. I object to the cult of masculinity, toxic masculinity, that believes that owning a gun somehow makes one a complete person. I don't think so. I think becoming a complete person is a whole other internal process, one which I'm still working on over here. But it involves empathy and compassion and contributing to others. And I think we have created an emotional context around guns on all sides of the issue. We have liberals are perceived as being anti-gun, which is not the case, and conservatives are being perceived as radical gun nuts, which is not the case. But the NRA and the Second Amendment fanatics and the people like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the Meal Team 6, the gravy train boys, they have dominated the discussion by equating guns with their masculinity and their patriotism, and that is so not the case. It's such that we look at the pictures they post online, and most of us, it's like, I don't say anything because I have a rule against fat shaming or appearance shaming of any kind, but I look at their pictures and say, it's like, dude, a Marine on a sick day could take out 6 of you.
Now, you've one of your things you pointed out was the 25 years old. That's a point where a lot of people will accept the fact that the brain has achieved uh, a reasonable level of completion. It's not still developing.
Yeah,
Um,
I can remember a shift in my outlook and behavior between from when I turned from 23 to 25. There was a point um, at age 23 I really couldn't be trusted, and at age 25 I began, why am I doing that crap? Of course, I didn't really begin to approach maturity until maybe 35 or 50. I think about the time I adopted Sean, I started to realize what maturity might look like.
but you've done a fine job of it since you discovered it, and so you're a connoisseur of it. Now, let's get back to that concept of the 25-year-old. Let's just say we wanted that to happen. Okay, that means getting it through the politicians, and anything that's got to go through the politicians faces this really incredible problem that any Republican politician who's willing to talk real gun safety laws or is going to get killed in the primary. Okay, the primaries are where moderate Republicans go to die. And so I have often thought that I said the only way we're ever going to fix what's wrong with our political system is possibly the end of the one issue voter. And the end of the one issue voter comes through something called ranked choice. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with ranked choice voting, it's a way that best way to put it is if it gets you the most qualified person generally, not the person with the uh, who's able to go out and paint his opponent as the most evil person alive. In ranked choice voting, actually, civil discussion is shown to be the better way to get elected than um, pushing it. But it'll. Have you got any thoughts on that, David?
Well, I tend to agree with you. I like ranked choice. Ranked choice voting is how the Hugo Awards are voted, and I believe the Nebulas too. I haven't paid that much attention to the award voting systems, but I did have to pay a little attention around 2015. It works like this. The first round of Hugo ballots, the first round, they take the first place votes. If there's no clear winner, but even if there is, they then put aside the first place votes and look at the second place vote. So when you get your Hugo ballot, you have your 5 choices and you rank them. This is first, this is second, this is third. This. All right. So when they count the votes, first they count the first place votes, then they count the second place. They take out the first place votes and they tally the second place and so on. What this does is you might have in the first count, you might have a very close tie, but no clear winner. But when you go to the second place votes, you start to develop a clear trend. And when you go to the third and fourth place votes, it puts somebody over the top. And you don't have to go to runoffs. You don't have and you don't have ties. You have very clear winners. And what you have is the representation of people say, well, gee, I really, really, really like this Ursula K. Le Guin story. So I'll vote for that for number 1. And I like this other Ursula K. Le Guin story. I'll vote for that for number 2. And over here, this David Gerrold story, he can be number 3, right? Well, by the time you've gone through 3 rounds, Ursula K. Le Guin has split her votes in the David Gerrold story. Actually, that's not the voting that won the Martian Child, but because I did take a look. But that would be how a strong third place contender could defeat your top 2 winners if the top 2 didn't have strong votes down the line. So you have your fanatic voters who will vote number 1 for their blah, 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 blah. But you have the more rational voters who are familiar with more of the choices, and they will vote the entire ballot, and the entire ballot gets represented there. So ranked choice voting I think it's more representational of what a population thinks. Is like, okay, so if I can't have Ursula K. Le Guin, I'll take David Gerrold. See, that actually represents thinking a more complicated form of thought than the binary vote. It's like our binary system of voting is yes or no. It's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. It's Joe Biden or so and so. It's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, whatever. And that's binary, and that forces you into a very binary. We had people thinking, well, I have to vote for Trump because I don't trust Hillary. It's like, dude, she's been around for 30 years and she's survived multiple smear campaigns, the most competent, qualified candidate we've ever had running for office. And the best you can vote, your best justification is, I don't know. And you're voting for a man who's had all these multiple bankruptcies and, blah, blah, blah. So, all right. So, yeah. Whereas if we had ranked choice voting, Donald Trump would never have gotten near the White House.
But I think that we're talking a lot of people, because if you go back and look at Alaska, ranked choice voting is not a way that's going to put Democrats in power, and it's not a way that's going to put Republicans in power. If you looked at the last election up there, the governor was a Trump-endorsed Republican governor. Ranked choice voting put him in. Okay. Lisa Murkowski, a moderate Republican senator. Ranked choice voting put her in while she might have easily lost a primary. Sarah Palin lost to a moderate Democrat. But there's one word that you hear a lot when you're talking about the outcome of ranked choice voting, and that is moderate. And when 75% of America want red flag laws, 75% of Americans want gun checks, 75% of Americans want to stop turning our streets into Civil War battlefields. This will get you, ranked choice voting will get you, your party might still win the vote, but it's going to be somebody who's more reasonable, more willing to work to solve the problem. And for the Republican people or the Democratic people who think that any compromise is a failure, those people won't win the election. And we're going to get back to a Congress that was able to find solutions. We'll get back to government better able to find solutions to these sticky problems, because we don't live in a world where every person gets to make the individual choice on how the government works. We have a representative democracy where we select people that represent us. And when we
I think you're right. I think you're right. You make a good case. You make a strong case.
Yeah, and I just get going, and then what happens? But some of the other things, I've always had this notion. I like the insurance. I did the numbers. And if you consider every time you kill somebody with a gun, you're going to pay $1 million, which is probably low. That's $20 billion that's going to be sucked out of and put into insurance. And when you consider the
well, see, the insurance companies would love it. It's more business. And here in California, the insurance companies are not taking new home insurance because of the wildfire threats and so on. They would love to be able to replace that business and say, oh, you have a gun? Well, and you were required to have insurance. Here's our insurance policies. So, if I were a gun owner and I had to pay gun insurance, you bet I believe I would protect myself against theft and violence and so on.
Yeah, that's one of the other pieces. We always talk about the AR-15. I will tell you, in my humble opinion, if you want a home defense weapon, don't get one that's going to shoot through the next 3 houses on your block. Go get yourself a 20 gauge pump shotgun.
Yeah. And if somebody breaks into my house, I don't need to kill him. I just need to slow him down long enough for the police to get here. If I happen to shoot him in the gut, that's too bad. But, I mean, Sean and I have had these conversations about home defense. It's like if somebody comes into the house uninvited and they do not leave when they are told that, you can defend yourself. So, Um, but you don't have to kill them, and I'm not sure I would want to have somebody else's death on my conscience.
Okay. Let's have that. There's a comment. Let's see that cage match. The insurance lobby against the NRA.
I'd bet on the insurance lobby every time.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, I'm sorry. Why do you think I can't? What's the age for renting a car again?
Uh, what was
20,
that? What was that question again? What's the age for what?
renting a car.
Renting a car? I don't know.
I think it's 23. It could be 20.
Could be, yes. We once, I once got off an airplane here in LA and went to Hertz to rent a car. And we were having such a good time. We weren't drunk. We were just laughing like crazy. And midway through, the guy says, "I'm not going to rent you a car." Says, "I don't trust you." So, okay. So we walked across to Avis and rented a car there. And I've never rented a car from Hertz again. It's like, that was like, dude, really? We're in a good mood. We just got off an airplane. We made some money. We're happy. We're laughing. We joke. So apparently this guy was only used to dealing with grumpy people. And if we weren't grumpy, we weren't the customers Hertz wanted. Well, it's like, Hertz is not going to put me in a driver's seat ever again. We go to Enterprise or Avis. So, but I haven't rented a car in a long time. So,
Yeah, that's nothing like travel to make you grumpy. That'll do it. Now, let's talk about one that we haven't done. Force is equal to mass times acceleration, or I think it's something like that. MV squared. Energy. Yeah.
yeah.
Energy is MV squared. Now,
Force equals mass times acceleration. Yeah.
yeah, force but the energy that it imparts,
Yeah.
is the critical piece.
Yeah.
So I have proposed the concept that says the energy imparted by a bullet with a factor should be a basis for taxation, because I believe that taxing a vehicle, taxing a product, taxing alcohol, taxing cigarettes, taxing guns, taxing ammunition should be based on the societal harm done by that product. So cigarettes do a huge amount of societal harm. So tax the hell out of them. Alcohol, it has its share. Tax it. Um, Bullets. I think that my tax for a 22 caliber short, okay, I'll put a tax on there of a tenth of a penny or a half a penny a round. A long, double it. You want to go in there and take that same caliber and put enough force to go through 5 2x4s. That's a lot more energy. Raise the taxes on that bullet. Um, Little things like that I don't see why we don't do stuff like that.
That makes so much sense. That really makes so much sense. I have nothing to add to that.
I sat down and wrote that proposal up and sent it to our governor, our previous governor, bless his heart.
Yeah.
And it didn't get very far.
No. There are some marvelous ideas that make a lot of sense that simply you have to create the political will. It doesn't matter how good the idea is if you cannot create the political will to put it in place. And the right wing has done a marvelous job of creating the political will for obstructionism.
Yeah, because I mean, my uncle, when I was a kid, he gave me a big pile of stuff left over, and we're talking 55. Oh God, I said it 55 years ago. And you know what I have still sitting in a box of his stuff? The bumper sticker that says, "When guns are outlawed, only
outlaws will have guns."
Um, I like Liam Westcott's quote here. It says, "When the people lead, the leaders will follow." or at least the politicians.
Interesting thought.
Yeah, but I wish I had an answer that we could hit on, but every answer requires political will. And then there's the minor problem of the Supreme Court. Uh, what they started with Heller, where and now they've basically made it against the violation of the Constitution. I forget the ruling that says you can't ban people from walking around armed in public.
Yeah, I saw that one.
You know, I was at a protest where we were protesting gun violence. A man walked up, stood next to me and my granddaughter, and he had his gun on his hip. And he just stood there standing as close as he could without making a ruckus, just to show me he had that gun. Now, I don't care what you call it. That's an effort and intimidation, using that gun to intimidate people. And as long as we're going to be blind and say, oh, well, he wasn't really trying to intimidate you, that was just his freedom of speech. Bullshit. We had a fella pull a gun on a lady here in town because she pulled up to his gas pump. That was the pump he normally used. And by God, she needed to move her car, and he pulled a gun. I just don't know what. It's not going to get better without action. And if Columbine didn't change it, Columbine didn't inspire the kind of things that we need to start thinking about, I don't know what will.
I don't have an answer. It's like we can. Um, there's an old story where a group of mice are sitting around talking about what are we going to do about the cat. And finally, somebody comes up with a great idea, says, I know, let's put a bell on the cat so we can hear it coming. And they all agree this is a terrific idea until somebody says, and who's going to bell the cat? Because the problem here is not that there are no solutions. The problem is, how do we get the solutions in place? And that is the real issue we have to address. And it means, even though you have come up with a great idea in ranked choice voting and a great idea about the way we tax things and so on, I mean, these are brilliant ideas, Bob. We're not going to get there unless we create the political will to put these things in place. And that requires a couple of leaders who are willing to build a career on this. And it means fundraising. It means organizing. It means recruiting people to be on the team. It means creating a political movement. Either that or finding a political movement that already exists and enrolling them into inviting them into taking on these positions as goals. There are a lot of things that take a lot of time. What happens is if we get a major event like 9/11, the knee-jerk reaction is often worse than the original impulse. What we did to ourselves after 9/11 was we restricted our freedoms in a number of places in order to prevent the next 9/11. Well, that's all very well and good, but we are now living in a proto-police state. And in fact, we've militarized our police departments. And that's coming back from wherever are great candidates to be on a police force. Well, now they think in terms of subduing an angry population because that was their experience in the Mideast or Afghanistan. Or distrusting everybody. Worse, the right wing has viewed the military and the police forces as great places to put their followers. Because if you want to build a police state, that's where you take over the police force.
And if you've noticed, the gun lobby has some incredible support among law enforcement. And they've also got, though, the people who are getting shot at would kind of like to see a little bit fewer guns on the street.
In England, the cops don't carry guns. They don't need them. And our police, hardly a day goes by that we don't read in the news or hear on the news that the police have killed somebody unfairly. It's like these guys, I won't say it's true of all police, but too many of these guys are cowards. It's like they reach for their gun as a solution. They don't want to get hurt, so it's easier to shoot the person than to tackle them.
Well, and that is absolutely true. We're averaging in 2022, we were averaging a little over 3 people a day getting shot by the police. And until we change and modify that concept that said the level, the trigger for when you're authorized to use deadly force is I was afraid. I was afraid. Good God, I'm afraid when I go walk my yard at night and I hear something going on out there. That doesn't mean I don't do it. You're taking the money to do the job. I read once, and it was the most disgusting thing I ever saw. A woman police officer had a guy that she had tasered twice, and he was laying on the ground quivering. And she was scared to death, and he had fallen when he got this done, and was laying on his hands without control of his bodily functions. She's screaming at him, "Show me your hands, show me your hands." He couldn't. So she said, I was afraid he was going to pull a gun, and so I shot him and killed him. That is not an acceptable society. Or, we could go on and on about police violence, but police violence is not the leading cause of gun deaths. It accounts for 5% of all gun deaths, excluding suicide. But I could go on, but that's where we have the moderating influence of David Gerrold here.
The only reason I'm perceived as moderate is because I have learned not to lose my patience in public. Trust me, in private, I was like, I would never mind. I suppose it's either maturity or exhaustion. It's like, how do I produce a result out of this? It's like, but the flashes of anger, I'll tell you, there are times, if I had a red button, then I could holler a name and push the button. There are days. I have a friend who used to joke, just let me kill 6 people a day. The world will be a better place. I get where you're coming from, but it wouldn't stop. Anyway, listen, thanks. I have to go to take care of my next responsibility. I have a busy day here, as we discussed. So,
yes. So we are coming to the end, David. And I want to say thank you. You've been a brilliant guest with some wonderful ideas. And again, you talk about age. Let's fix the age gap. Let's not give guns to children. That's one of the best things. And you talk about gun safety, gun training, gun responsibility, insurance, all good. And so thank you very much. And let's remember all of these. And next week on B Cube Sunday morning, we'll be back. And for now, you want to say anything else before we say goodbye?
Yep. Please visit my Patreon page or visit my Facebook page and contribute to my GoFundMe so we can move to Vermont. Thank you.
Go fund David to move him to Vermont.
Yeah.
California doesn't deserve him.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.